He had 30 seconds. No more. On the 7th of March 1945, the first American assault troops reached the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen and found the last major Rhine bridge still standing. Stay with this, and you will see exactly why Captain Karl Timmerman pushed men onto a bridge rigged to explode, why the blast failed, and why that half-minute changed the collapse of Nazi Germany. This is not only about one bridge. It is about the moment when waiting feels safer, but delay kills more people than motion. You know that feeling, even far from war. Steel groaned under shell fire. Smoke hung low over the river. In that noise, one decision moved thousands of men east of the Rhine before anyone could stop them. If the bridge went down, the Allied armies would still cross the Rhine. But not here, not that day, and not at that speed. Supreme Headquarters had prepared larger crossings farther north under Montgomery and farther south under Bradley, with boats, engineers, smoke screens, and weeks of planning. Remagen was different. It was an accident. A hole torn open in the German line before anyone expected it. That is why the moment matters. A collapsed bridge means more ferries under fire, more river assaults, more men in cold water with machine gun rounds cracking overhead. You can hear the river first at Remagen, not the history. Dark water striking the piers, wind carrying the smell of explosive. One surviving bridge became a shortcut through the final wall, guarding Germany's heartland. That accidental crossing opened the way faster than anyone had planned. By March 1945, the German army in the west was collapsing in fragments. Units retreated through burned towns, horse carts, shattered trucks, and columns of refugees choking the roads. The Rhine was the last natural barrier. Hitler ordered every usable bridge destroyed. At Remagen, the task fell under Major Hans Scheller, with engineers, flak crews, and whoever else could be gathered. But orders came late. Detonators were poor. Communications failed. American fighter bombers kept appearing with the hard tearing sound of engines dropping low over the valley. Men worked under dust, brick fragments, and fear. The bridge itself was old, blackened, and tired from years of strain. German troops crossed eastward under it, over it, around it. Each minute kept it alive. Each minute made its survival more dangerous for both sides. The first American reports were wrong in the most dangerous way. Elements of the U.S. 9th Armored Division believed the bridge might be lightly defended and only partially prepared for demolition. It was not. Charges had been placed. Machine guns covered the approaches. German troops still held the far bank. Lieutenant John Grimble and other officers moving with the advance could see the bridge, but not the full depth of what waited on it. That is how battles often begin. Not with certainty, with a blurred picture and a clock running faster than thought. The afternoon air smelled of wet masonry and cordite. Broken glass crunched under boots near the western ramp. You move because standing still on open ground is also a choice. Sometimes it is the worst one. Would you know that in time? Captain Karl Timmerman of Company A, 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, saw what few officers ever expect to see in war. The enemy's last great river barrier still open. He was 22, young enough that in another year he might have been finishing school. Instead, he stood under incoming fire, with a bridge in front of him and no clean option. Wait for artillery and the Germans might blow it. Rush forward, and his men might die on the span itself. The steel trusses rang with distant impacts. A cold wind came off the Rhine and cut through wet uniforms. Timmerman chose to attack at once, not because it was safe, because time had already turned against him. That decision, made in noise and dust, is the spine of everything that followed at Remagen. Then the Germans fired the charges. A flash, a hard, flat concussion. Concrete dust rolled across the roadway and out over the river like breath in winter. For a second, men on the western bank thought the center section would fold and vanish. It did not. The deck lifted, shuddered, then dropped back into place. The bridge was damaged, but still there. Later accounts point to weak explosives, poor placement, damaged wiring, and the use of lower-grade industrial charges instead of stronger military stock. The promise made at the start is here. That 30-second gamble existed because the demolition failed when it should have worked. You can imagine the sound after the blast. not cheering first. Silence. Men staring through gray dust, trying to understand whether the bridge beneath all that smoke was dead or merely wounded. They moved immediately. Lieutenant Hugh Mott led engineers forward to cut wires and search for charges while infantry rushed the western entrance. This is the scene people remember. Smoke drifting low, splinters underfoot, the river below, dark and loud between the girders. Men sprinting in short bursts because the bridge could still go at any second. German machine gun fire stitched the deck, snapping against steel with a sharp, metallic cough. Sergeant Alexander Drabick became one of the first Americans to run the full length under fire. He later said he did not zigzag because there was no room and no point. Just straight ahead. You can feel the deck vibrating through his boots. That is how narrow history becomes. Not speeches, not maps. One man, one bridge, one decision repeated by the next man behind him. Hugh Mott was not chasing glory. He was looking for wires. While riflemen fought forward, engineers crawled along the structure, searching for the remaining demolition setup. Their hands worked against cold steel slick with dust and grease. Some charges had already failed. Others might still be live. Mott and his men cut ignition cables and threw explosives off the bridge where they could. Every second on that span asked the same question: are you disabling a trap or kneeling inside it? German rounds kept hitting the trusses overhead, showering rust and concrete chips. The smell was bitter, chemical, close to the face. This is where Remagen stopped being luck alone. Luck left the bridge standing. Men with wire cutters kept it from dying a minute later. Without them, the first crossing might have become a mass grave. Once Americans reached the eastern towers, the battle changed shape. It was no longer just a dash across a bridge. It became a fight to hold a bridgehead before German reserves could seal it shut. Timmerman's men cleared tunnels, embankments, and nearby houses where defenders still fired from windows and stone cover. The sharp echo of rifle shots in the railway cut made distance hard to judge. You hear one crack and think it came from 20 yards away. It came from 80. Major Hans Scheller tried to organize resistance, but the defense was already fractured. Prisoners began to come in by groups. Some were dazed. Some still expected the bridge to be gone behind the Americans. That was the shock at Remagen. The impossible had happened, and both sides needed minutes to believe it. The first men across do not matter much if nobody follows them. At Remagen, thousands did. Tanks, tank destroyers, ammunition trucks, medics, signal crews, and more infantry began pouring over the bridge, while engineers worked beneath constant strain. The steel deck shook under weight. It was never meant to bear after demolition damage. Boards rattled. Bolts groaned. White dust drifted from the trusses whenever another vehicle crossed. By night, the bridgehead was real. By the next days, it was expanding. General Courtney Hodges and 1st U.S. Army understood what had opened in front of them. An unplanned crossing that forced the German High Command to react to Allied timing, not its own. You can almost smell hot engine oil and damp river mist mixing in the dark. That is what exploitation sounds like in war. Not triumph, pressure. News of the bridge reached Hitler fast, and the reaction was savage. Officers connected to the failure at Remagen faced courts-martial, execution orders, and immediate punishment. Major Hans Scheller was among those blamed. In Berlin, reality had become treason. The bridge still standing could not be explained as confusion, poor materials, broken wires, or a front collapsing under immense pressure. So the regime looked for traitors instead. This is another cost of battles fought inside dying dictatorships. Men can be killed for losing positions that were already impossible to hold. German attempts to destroy the bridge intensified. Artillery landed around it. Aircraft attacked. V-2 rockets were even fired toward the area. Wildly inaccurate but terrifying. The air there never settled. It shook with engine noise, shell bursts, and the long stress of waiting for a second collapse. The Ludendorff Bridge did not survive the victory it made possible. For 10 days, engineers reinforced it, while traffic streamed across and attacks continued. For 10 days, engineers reinforced it, while traffic streamed across and attacks continued. Then, On the 17th March 1945, the structure finally collapsed into the Rhine. It killed 28 American engineers and injured many more. That is the part simple retellings often leave out. The bridge was not saved. It was used up. Men had stood on weakened steels, listening to the low grinding complaint of metal under stress, because the crossing mattered more than their safety. The water that day was brutally cold. Rescue work happened among bent beams, oil slicks, and floating debris. So when people call Remagen a lucky break, they are not wrong. They are only unfinished. Luck opened the door. It still demanded a price in bodies before it closed. Did Remagen end the war by itself? No, but it accelerated the rhythm of the final campaign in a way the German command could not comfortably absorb. Allied forces established a substantial bridgehead east of the Rhine earlier than expected, forcing defensive improvisation at the very moment Germany had little left to improvise with. More crossings followed. More pressure spread down the line. The psychological effect mattered too. A barrier that had stood in planning maps as a major obstacle was suddenly pierced by momentum, nerve, and a failed demolition. In war, confidence can collapse almost as fast as concrete. Imagine hearing on the German side that Americans are already over the river you were told would stop them. The taste in your mouth would turn metallic, not from blood, from the understanding that the end has changed speed. History likes large words. That's front, army, breakthrough, surrender. The men at Remagen faced something smaller and crueler, a choice measured in breaths. Timmerman did not know the blast would fail. Drabik did not know the far bank would break. Humat did not know which wire still carried death. They acted inside uncertainty, not after it ended. That is why this battle still reaches beyond 1945. Most decisive moments in life do not arrive with full information either. They arrive with noise, incomplete reports, and the pressure of other people, depending on what you do next. You can almost feel the splintered planks under your soles, the cold rail against your palm. The scale is different now. The structure of the choice is not. Move too soon, and you pay. Move too late, and others pay for you. Men who survived Remagen carried more than a medal line or a unit citation. They carried memory in fragments, the ring of bullets on steel, the smell after the failed blast, the strange shame some survivors always describe when chance spared them and not the man 2 yards away. War does not end cleanly inside the people who walk away from it. The bridge crossing became a legend because it was dramatic. For the men there, it was also intimate. Faces half seen through dust, orders shouted and lost in wind, a body falling where, 1 second earlier, there had been motion. You may know battles by dates. The people inside them know temperatures, sounds, and names. Karl Timmerman, Alexander Drabik, Hugh Mott. The map remembers the bridgehead. They remembered the bridge under their feet. He had 30 seconds. That is still the cleanest way to understand Remagen. Not as a miracle, not as a movie scene. As a narrow interval where damaged steel, failed explosives, and human nerve overlapped long enough to change the pace of a war. The Ludendorff Bridge is gone. The river is still there, cold, indifferent. What remains is the question left inside the moment itself. If you were Karl Timmerman, seeing smoke on the span and knowing the charges might fire again, would you order your men forward before certainty arrived? Or would you wait and risk losing the only bridge? And if your own family carries a war story, one decision, one crossing, one person who moved before the order came, tell that story where others can weigh it against these same 30 seconds.